Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello, and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today, I am here with a returning author to the podcast. The Sunday Times best-selling author, Keshe Chow, is here for her latest novel, For No Mortal Creature. Hi, Keshe. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you back. I think you are officially a regular on the pod. Two counts, right?
I feel very privileged.
So why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners all about For No Mortal Creature?
Yeah, so For No Mortal Creature is a dark gothic a young adult fantasy, and it's basically what I like to call my Wuthering Heights crossed with Inception, but with ghosts book. So it's basically based in a world where ghosts can die and become ghosts of ghosts, and then ghosts of ghosts can die and become ghosts of ghosts of ghosts, and so on and so forth. And no one actually knows how deep the afterlife goes. And in this book, my main character has to delve into the death realm to save her grandmother, but also deal with and take revenge on Lynn, the boy who once betrayed her, who is now a ghost.
How did you come up with the idea of like ghosts becoming ghosts becoming ghosts?
Well, I mean, I love the movie Inception. Like I've seen it so many times. It just like absolutely blew my mind the first time I saw it, and I'm always like watching it, just getting my mind blown again. So that was kind of a bit of an inspiration. But also one time when I was researching Chinese demons, basically on the internet, I came across this word that's like jian, which is an outdated, like it's quite an obsolete term now, but it means ghost of a ghost. And as soon as I saw that word, I was like, oh my goodness, like what if ghosts can actually die and become ghosts of ghosts, and then they can die again? And like how many times can like a ghost die before then they're reincarnated? Like it started like the gears turning, and then I came up with this idea. And the Wuthering Heights sort of inspiration came a little bit later, just because I really wanted it to be very gothic. And again, I love Wuthering Heights. I'm always rereading that book. It just kind of tied in really nicely, and it ended up being like kind of a very weird set of comp titles. But honestly, I'm like a weird person, so it's
I think it sounds so interesting, and I really cannot wait to see this dynamic on print outside of a movie, because I do like the movie Inception too. I thought it was a really unique and interesting concept, and now a ghosty version. I mean, I'm in.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Like, I think all these things kind of just scare me. I mean, my first book was about mirrors. They really scare me, especially at night. And the whole idea of like dreams can be quite scary, like the whole idea that you're in this like other world. I remember one time one of my friends got really into kind of lucid dreaming and astral projection, and he was telling me all this stuff, and I started to get really freaked out by it. So dreams have always also been something that's quite scary to me. And obviously ghosts. I'm terrified of ghosts. I'm the biggest wimp ever. I've been terrified of ghosts since I was like 8 or something like that. And one of my friends told me a ghost story, and I've never gotten over it. So yeah, I feel like I'm very drawn to writing about things that I'm really scared of.
I think we touched
Last
on
time.
that a tiny bit your first time here when you were talking
Yes.
about the girl with no reflection. And you
Yes.
were talking about how you were just like so scared of your own story. What do you
Yeah.
think inspires you to put your own fears into your novels?
I think it just provokes a really strong visceral reaction for me. And I think as an author or like any sort of artist, like that's what you're wanting, right? You want to bring out some sort of visceral reaction in the person who's consuming that art. And so I'm always like, well, if I'm scared of things, surely other people, maybe they're not quite so scared as me. I don't know. Like maybe I'm like quite extreme on the level of being a wimp. But that's, I think, why. And I think it just kind of intrigues me. I think like everything that you find scary is also kind of also a bit intriguing. That's why people love reading true crime, and why people gravitate towards like gory horror stuff, and why you can't look away when you see like, a car accident and stuff. It's like it's this pull to consume something that really frightens you. And I think it's just that emotional response. It's just like how hate and love are like two sides of the same coin. I think fear and intrigue is sort of like two sides of the same coin as well.
I love that. You write a little bit of, scary elements in your work. Have you considered writing a horror?
I have, and I am actually not a massive consumer of horror because I am a scaredy cat. I actually cannot watch any horror movies. The last horror movie I ever saw was The Ring, which I think is probably aging me quite a lot. But it scared me so much that I swore off horror movies ever since then, and I haven't seen a single one since. Similarly with books, I have to be very careful about the books I consume. If I'm reading something that I might find scary, I have to read it during the day, or I just don't read it at all. Even like random things like Doctor Who episodes, like my husband loves Doctor Who. And so I watch a lot of them with him, but there's certain ones where they seem quite innocuous, but I will see it and I'm like, no, no, I can't watch this. I have to leave the room. Or, there's one from one of the seasons, I think like the Ninth Doctor, where there was like a kid in a gas mask.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness, that one freaked me out so badly that I like the trauma lasted for years, literally. And so I have to be so careful. So yeah, the thing is that I don't really read a lot of horror because I think it would scare me too much, which sounds really weird because I write sort of like horror tinged stuff. But when it comes out of my own brain, it's not quite so bad because I know it's not real. But if it's someone else, I think that it's really hard. I would love to read more horror. I'd love to write horror, but I think I just have to kind of, I don't know, harden up a little bit, I think.
So I love that you mentioned Doctor Who because now you may remember this because you and I have talked outside of the podcast before. But I'm a big Doctor Who fan,
Yeah.
and my youngest child is named River. So we are big Doctor Who fans here as well. And there are certainly some episodes that I found terrifying. For
Yeah,
me,
there's
the scariest one for me was Midnight. Did you ever see that one with David
Oh,
Tennant?
I'm not sure if I've seen that one. What's about? Which one? What was that one about?
There's this creature, and we never actually see it, but it gets inside this train that they're in, and it
Oh,
essentially possesses a
yes.
woman, and she starts repeating everything everyone
Yeah,
says.
my goodness, that is
Yes,
terrifying. Yes.
that
Yeah,
one
that
was
one is really scary.
in,
I was
and
going to mention that one. Yeah.
that's the
In terms of like,
scariest one.
yeah, like it's like psychological horror. And I was like always thinking like that would have been, so low budget to film because they were literally just in like one setting and it was just like a cast of people and they didn't have to have like any special effects, but it was still so frightening because of just the way that woman just kept on repeating stuff and was learning as well. I've been thinking about this recently actually because I was thinking it's a bit like AI, right? It's a bit like how AI is like learning
Yeah.
things so fast to the point where you're like, I don't know what the end game of this is. I don't know what the outcome is going to be of this AI thing. And similarly with that episode, that character sort of just learns so fast and starts to learn all of the mannerisms and the speech patterns of humans that you're sort of like, at what point? And I think there's a point where we're probably doing massive spoilers here, but there's a point where she overtakes them and she starts saying things before the people even start saying them. And I'm like, this is such a analogy for AI. Like there's a point where it's going to start outsmarting us and it's going to start doing things that we can't predict. And that's really scary.
AI has honestly gotten so scary. I have seen some videos, like just scrolling
Mm.
through reels and everything, and it really looked like a newswoman who was, given
Yes.
this crazy video and the first few seconds you're like, okay, this does look like a news video. And then all of a sudden like a spaceship comes up behind her and she goes, "I'm not
Yes.
real." And that just blew my mind. And
It's
also, how
terrifying.
dare you?
Yes, I know. It's terrifying. It's like I think that it feels as though it's getting a little bit beyond our control, and that's quite scary. So
And then what happens, really?
exactly, exactly. I don't know whether anyone's watched Terminator Judgment Day, but again, aging myself, but seriously, like that was a seminal experience. I don't want that to happen.
Honestly, between AI and Midnight, I think we just found the premise for your horror novel.
Oh my goodness. I think someone else might have to write that one.
That'd be too scary.
Yeah.
Oh, so sorry.
No, you're right.
And
Late for
just,
you.
yeah, a little bit. So, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff you're working on next?
Yeah, sure. So obviously I've got For No Mortal Creature coming out this October and then next May, so May 2020, first book out of my first adult duology comes out. And that one's called Strange Familiars. And basically it is about a magical veterinary school where they treat witches' familiars and mythical beasts. And it's based on some of my own experiences because I'm a vet. I'm a veterinarian in terms of my professional qualifications. So vet school was a while ago for me. And it definitely wasn't as interesting as like treating dragons and things, but I still was able to utilize a lot of my own experiences and a lot of my own knowledge. So that was really fun. And it's got one of my favorite characters ever, which is a cat, a snarky cat familiar. And it's academic rivals to lovers about two people from different departments in the vet school. So the magical familiars vets are a little bit more like small animal vets. They treat cats and snakes and owls, whereas the mythical beast vets are like the large animal vets. They're treating unicorns and dragons and centaurs and things like that. So they're like the outdoorsy, rugged types. They have a big rivalry because they're both trying to come top of class.
I love that. And I love taking something from your personal experience and putting a supernatural spin on it. That's something I always like to see in novels. My question for you is, what was it like starting off with YA and transitioning into adult fantasy? Does that change your writing process, your inspirations? How does that work?
I think they're not too different. One thing about me is that I like to make things very hard for myself. So typically, YA is often first person present, tense and POV, and typically adult fantasy traditionally, not anymore, but traditionally it was always like third person past. And I basically did it backwards. So my first YA book was third person past. My one upcoming For No Mortal Creature is in first person past. And then for my adult book, I just decided, well, I'm going to try first person present because I love the pacing and how immersive it is. And so that's a dual POV from both main characters' perspectives, and it's first person present. I feel like I've done things completely backwards. I guess there was a difference in terms of how I approached the writing just because of the format that I wrote it in. I think in terms of everything else, I ended up having to query another agent to get an adult agent because my original agent only repped kidlit. So I wrote this book. I wrote it really fast because I just got like the bug. I wrote it like in 27 days. It was kind of the first book in a while that I have written where I didn't know what the outcome would be. I didn't know whether it would ever be published. So it kind of felt like I was writing it just for me, which was really nice because that's quite a different experience writing a book that was already contracted that you know is going to be published versus a book that you're just writing because you've got the love of it. And I really captured that love and that joy that I had for writing in the beginning. For No Mortal Creature was the first book I'd ever had to write a full outline for because that's how I sold the book to my publisher. Basically, they wanted a sample of a certain number of chapters and they wanted full outline. I had to plot that one, and it was so hard. It took me so long to plot it because I'm just not a natural plotter. And then writing it after I'd already plotted was also a very different experience from just pantsing a book. I felt like it was a little bit like digging out my heart with like a spoon, to use another old analogy, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And so it was really hard. It was really, really difficult process because I was trying to draw this creativity out of something that was already, I felt, set in stone. It did end up deviating from the outline, which kind of, caused my editor, like, she was kind of like, what happened to the happy ending? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to have some semblance of like being a pantser. But yeah, it was a really different experience. And writing the adult book was just joyful because I could just write it. And I was like, I don't know what's happening with this book. I don't know whether I'll even get an agent for it. I don't know whether it'll get published, but it's just going to be for me. And when I ended up getting offers of representation from agents, they said we could feel the joy that you had writing this book. And I'm like, it was just such a fun experience. So, yeah, I think in terms of everything else, there hasn't been too different. I think that one thing about my young adult is that the editorial process was a lot more in depth. The adult book has kind of been a lot more of a breeze to kind of get through the editorial process. But that might just be different house styles or different editor styles. It's hard to say because I only really have N equals 2. I've got my adult editor, I've got my YA editor. I haven't really worked with too many more than that. They've been quite different experiences, but also both really fulfilling in their own ways.
That's really great. And honestly, I'd have to say, in regards to the ending change, honestly, that's what they get for asking a pantser to plot a happy ending. Like they were asking for it at that
Exactly,
point.
exactly. When I was writing the outline, I literally just couldn't think of any other endings. I'm like, I'm just going to put this one in here. And then when I was writing, I was like, hang on, I could make this even better. And so she was like, what did you do to me? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But yeah, you did, yeah, that's the way it is.
I mean, they were asking for it at that point.
For sure, for sure. I don't know how political you like to get. When I was talking about AI before, I was like, oh God, like, do we even broach that topic?
We can go for it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing about it is that it does scare me, the whole authors using AI, because I know that there are some that are, and there are some groups I'm part of on social media, like on Facebook and things, that are very pro AI. They're pro AI for non-writing things. There are authors out there that are using it for promo things or that are using it for their audiobooks and stuff like that. And I'm like, do you not see how quickly that can segue into other people using AI to write whole books? Kind of, it's threatening the livelihoods of all artists, right? And I think even if I was pro AI, which I'm not, I'm absolutely against it for a number of reasons, environmental and ethical and all that sort of stuff. But even if I was, I probably would be really slow to get into it because I'm just a very slow adopter of new technology anyway. But I've literally never even like used like Chat GPT or whatever. I don't even know whether it's like an app or on the internet. I don't know how people use it. Well, I've never used it, and it just scares me.
I'm honestly genuinely shocked and saddened by how many authors and writers that have come out and straight up advocated for using AI
Yeah.
in their process, whether it is through research, through editing, through rewrites, through marketing. I feel like if you are using AI in any of these spheres, one, as you said, you're taking away from other artists. And two, it kind of cheapens the industry as a whole, in my
Mm.
opinion. It just takes out the heart of the work. It takes the heart out of
Yes.
writing. And honestly, if authors start pushing for AI to be a big part of our industry, it's just really going to change the industry. And I don't think it would be for the better.
I feel as though it's going to remove a lot of ability to think critically about stuff and to just be creative. I think that is what separates us from non-human animals. It's that higher order thinking. It's the ability to be creative and to have imagination and to think critically about things and to empathize as well. That's a really big thing that differentiates humans from non-human mammals. And I think that's kind of trying to take that away from us, that's trying to put it into the hands of machine. And that being said, I also like came across this like really frightening theory once about, I can't remember what the theory was called, but it was like someone was saying like there's this theory that like eventually AI will take over or like computers will take over. And if you haven't been kind to them, if you've spoken negatively about them in the past, you're going to be who they're going to come after. So I'm like, always say please and thank you. But yeah, still, it just is something that really frightens me. I think it really does, like you say, take the heart out of creativity. Also, it's unethical because it's drawing on the intellectual property of other people who have come up with that out of their own brains. And it really dehumanizes what we're trying to do. So it is very, very frightening that so many people seem to be utilizing it, whether that's peripherally to the writing or for the actual writing itself, which we have also seen, obviously.
I initially thought that it was bad enough that we'd see like Vanity Press utilize AI to just churn out book
Mm,
after book. And I call them books lightly. But
mm,
now it seems recently, and I'm sure this hasn't only started recently, but is more of authors being more transparent about it recently. But the number of authors who are like, yes, I use AI, of course I use it, then still being supported even after they
yes.
say they use AI. We now have issues where authors are leaving AI prompts in their
Yes.
manuscripts and even in their final published works, not even just art copies, but even their final published works, leaving the AI prompts in there.
That's so wild. That's so
And then
wild. That is ridiculous.
and it's not even just the publishers and authors themselves, but other bookish companies like Book of the Month. Their recent pick straight
Yeah.
up said that this is AI. I mean, how? How can you justify
Yeah.
this? I don't understand how
Yeah. And
authors can
so,
justify.
yeah. I don't know either. I think that there's just so many good books out there that aren't getting published. It's like, why would you choose the ones that using AI over the ones that people have slogged and worked hard and drawn out of their own hearts and souls, basically. It just seems absolutely wild, like just unbelievable. And then that's not to mention all of the environmental aspects as well. I hear that it's just a massive environmental drain. And so there's so many reasons not to use it, but I feel as though it is slowly, creepingly becoming more accepted, and that's scary. And I think that the quality of it is improving at an astronomical rate to the point where sometimes it is hard to differentiate between stuff that's real and stuff that's not. And that has so many ramifications for not just creativity, but just for, what we can believe in like our media and stuff like that. I feel like it's getting away from us, and it's kind of at the point where people aren't willing to stop it.
Honestly, maybe the wildest thing about the rise of AI in publishing and writing is it was only a few months ago when it was discovered that Meta and Zuckerberg stole thousands and thousands and thousands of authors' works to train their AIs with.
Yes.
And we were all, very rightfully so,
Yes.
angered by this and offended by
Yeah.
this and speaking out against this. And then just a few months later, authors are like, oh, yeah, well, I use AI in my work. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Some of them
Yeah.
are the same authors who complained about theft, rightfully so,
Yeah.
and are now
Yeah.
using that same theft for their own work. What do you mean?
Yeah.
How do you justify that?
It's such cognitive dissonance. I think it's like when it affects them, they get so righteous and upset about it. But if it affects others, it's not an issue. And I think that's what I've seen. I mean, my own book was one of those stolen by Meta as well, which is upsetting. But I think that a lot of the authors I see supporting AI currently are using it in like a non-writing way. They're using it to like develop like hooks for their promo, or they're using it for cover art, or like even just to use it for a character reference. Like they'll be like, oh, I can't really picture my characters, so I'm just going to like feed some prompts into an AI machine and get it to draw my character so I can describe it. And I was like, that just feels to me like such a fundamental skill you have as an author to be able to describe things. You can use like reference photos and things like that, but it's one of those things that I feel like you don't have to rely on exploiting other people to do your own creative work. It seems absolutely gobsmacking, well, flabbergasting really, that people would separate the whole AI use for other, for artists and things like that from like what we're doing as authors. I think it's all so intertwined that can't compartmentalize and say, well, it's okay if we use it for art and not for writing. Like that's not true. And yeah, like you said, there are even authors who are using it for writing openly. There's got to be a point where I just hope that the laws can catch up so that it becomes more regulated, because it might be different if you actually get paid for your work being used to train AI. Maybe that would be okay. I'm not really sure. I'm not like a ethical expert or anything, but at the moment, as it stands, it's not happening.
I think if authors were paid, that would certainly make a difference in not just authors, but artists as a whole, because obviously AI gained popularity through artwork being stolen and then
Yes.
regenerated. So I feel like if artists were paid across the board for this use, that would make some
Yeah.
change in the ethical nature. Obviously, it would
Yeah.
not address the environmental impact, but at least from a theft
Yes.
standpoint, at least then it wouldn't be stealing.
Yes.
I also
Yeah.
personally, I believe you should not be able to make money off of anything that uses AI. I don't think you should be able to
Yeah.
sell AI artwork prints. You shouldn't be able to publish
No.
and sell books that were utilized AI. I think it needs to be banned to make money off of generative AI
Yes.
work because you didn't create it.
I agree. That would definitely be a good law. I think it's advancing too fast for laws to keep up, basically.
And that's another issue as well, because as we know, at least in the US, and I'm sure it's similar in many other countries, the legislative process takes time.
Mm,
And in some places it takes longer than others. I feel like in the US, the legislative process can be exceedingly slow and can take years for something to pass, even if it is something that people want. But AI growing too swiftly for that
yes. Yeah,
process to
I
keep
agree.
up with, to the point that I feel like no one is really trying anymore, because by the time you figure out something like, okay, if we make a law that specifically states this, well, AI can now do this six different things as well that isn't
Yeah, that's
covered by
right.
this law. And so
Yeah.
think that makes it extremely challenging on how we can legally regulate it.
It's advancing so fast. I remember reading about this AI model that this is completely unrelated to books and publishing, where they were training an AI model to, I think it was like a war simulation or something, to like attack enemies. And then the AI very quickly learnt that the only thing that was keeping it from achieving its objectives of attacking as many of the enemy as it could was the control center. And so it decided to turn around and start attacking the control center. That's so scary. It got to the point where it learned, I need to achieve this objective, and you are in my way because you are trying to control me. So this is what I mean about it. I feel like it's going to become beyond our ability to regulate and beyond our ability to control and to predict really very soon. I don't know. I feel like people continuing to feed work into it and continuing to use it, it's just perpetuating the ability for it to learn faster, and it's putting us all at risk. So that's what scares me so much about it. There's so many things that scare me about it, but this is not just me being like a scaredy cat this time. I think it's extremely justified.
Honestly feel like I've seen a movie like that before, like War Games or something like that.
I'm sure. Yeah,
And
yeah.
honestly, that stuff is supposed to be just science fiction. We don't need
Yes.
that. We don't
No,
need
we
to
don't want that
be
to be
playing
real.
with AI like that. Can we not?
No. Yes, I agree.
And I guess all I can really say is that I hope that the industry as a whole, at least the bookish industry, but I'd like to see other industries take that step forward and just collectively decide that we are not going to accept AI work. We're not going
Mm,
to allow AI to continue to infect our industry. And we want authenticity and genuine authors who do the work and tell their own stories.
yeah, for sure. I actually am happy with Penguin Random. So both of my books, or all of my books so far, have been contracted with Penguin Random House as my primary publisher. And they do have it in their contract as a boilerplate statement now that the work cannot be used to feed into generative AI models. And they also put it on their copyright pages, which is really nice. And I have had a few foreign contracts as well that stipulate that they're not allowed to use AI in the creation. So for translation purposes or for like the cover and things like that, it can be a little bit hard. Some of the publishers are becoming a bit resistant to putting anti-AI clauses in their contracts, but some of them will do it. So yeah, it's something that going forward, I'm always asking my agent to push for, anti-AI language, but it can be hard to get contracts through like that because they're not always so receptive about it. Penguin does have it on their copyright pages, which is nice.
That is excellent. I think that is a really great way for the industry as a whole to kind of fight against AI is by demanding anti-AI clauses in contracts.
Yes.
And I know
Yeah.
for newer authors, debut authors, indie authors, lesser known authors who haven't hit it big yet, there's going to be more of a challenge there. So the onus is really on the leaders of the industry and the authors who
Yes.
have that platform and have that voice to really take a stand and make those demands to make it easier for the rest of us to make those demands as well. And I think a lot of authors are really stepping up and doing that work on their own as well.
There's a lot of bigger authors that are very vocal proponents of anti-AI sentiments, which is really good to see. I think it's going to be one of those things that it's on all of us really. It's on the publishers, it's on the agents, it's on the authors, it's also on the readers to reject these things. If you know that an author is using AI or using AI artwork even, I think it's important to sit with your wallet, not buy that stuff, not buy into it. So yeah.
Absolutely. If readers decide as a whole, or at least as an overwhelming majority, that they're not going to buy books using AI or AI covers, the publishers will stop selling those books because they're not going to make money on them.
I hope that we can all contribute to preventing this becoming a massive issue because it is really, I think some people are seeing it as like, oh, authors or artists are just like worried about their like money and not making money, but it's not about money, it's about just the very core of what makes us human. And I think that taking that away is really just leading us down a dangerous path of like dehumanizing us and taking away our ability to create artistic expression. It's just a slippery slope.
I'll say this, and I have made this statement on my official Threads page at Crystal Hope. Must Love Books podcast will never, ever knowingly work with or platform an author who utilizes AI in any shape or form.
That's great. That's a good stance to take. I'm very impressed.
I think if we all make that stance, then we'll be able to at least protect our industry from AI.
Yeah, yep, I would hope so. I also can say that I'll never use AI in any of my creation, or anything really. I mean, that's the fun part of it, isn't it? Coming up with the ideas, that's the best part. Why would you want to outsource that? I don't want to outsource that. That's the bit I like. Don't take that away from me. You will need to pry it from my cold dead hands.
So let's bring it back to your novel For No Mortal Creature, which is out today. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to Must Love Books podcast and talking about For No Mortal Creature with me. And I just have to say that I cannot wait for the Ghostception.
Yeah, Ghostception, that's a really good term. And I think we both are writing or have written books with ghost characters. I
Yes.
mean, I'd love to hear more about yours, but I found it really hard. I don't know how you found it, but when I wrote from a ghost point of view, so at certain stages, my main character is a ghost, and I found it really hard just from a craft point of view because when I first started writing, I was not very good at writing interior emotions. That's something I had to work on, and with my first agent and my first editor, I worked a lot to develop that side of things to the point where now I think I'm quite good at it. But then when I started writing my ghost book, I had to really realize that I couldn't rely on all my normal like emotional crutches. So, they don't have hearts that pound, they don't have like sweat that springs out on their brow, they don't have like breaths that hitch in their chest or like that catch, and they can't like let out a slow breath or all of those sort of tells that tell you what their emotional state is. I couldn't use any of those. And so I found it logistically extremely challenging. I don't know how you found it when you wrote. I don't know whether you've got a ghost point of view or whether that's another character that's not your main character. But, yeah, I sort of was like, why did I do this to myself? It comes back to the whole I don't make things easy for myself. I always seem to choose the path of most resistance. It was very challenging, and I hope that I have achieved it. I will say that when I pointed that out to my editor, she was like, I didn't even notice that, which I was like, okay, well, that hopefully means I've done a good job, because I think if it was really noticeable, it would be really jarring, but hopefully it goes smoothly enough that people don't think it's weird. I found it really hard though.
I have to say, why did I do this to myself is a phrase that I have heard so many authors use
Yes.
that it just cracks me
So,
up. Like, we
yeah.
are all here and we love what we do, but also why? Why did we do
I
this to
know.
ourselves?
Sometimes you're like, why did I make this decision? And now I'm committed to it because, like, I mean, at that point, the book was sold. I had no other recourse. I couldn't change the way that I was writing it. I had to see it through to the end. There were just so many logistical challenges with this book, and it was part of the some of the rules that I made as well. Just what they could and couldn't touch, and things like when they move from one level of the afterlife to another, like how would their weapons come along with them, like I had to constantly keep track of like where things were, where the people were, what they could and couldn't touch, what they could and couldn't see, some of the weaponry. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, hang on, I forgot to bring their sword along, and now they are stranded and unarmed. That's not ideal when they're faced with a threat. So I had to then would have to go back and like fix things so that they didn't have that problem. So yeah, it was really challenging. I have to say that it was probably logistically one of the hardest books I've ever written from multiple points of view. Yeah, I don't know that I would tackle it again. And I remember at one point my editor was like, I used to think time travel was the most complicated, trope, but I think multiple levels of the death realm might equal that.
So, to answer your question about writing my own ghosts, so in my work in progress, Blood and Lies, there are a few ghosts that we do come across. None of them have a POV. They are
Mhm.
outside of the main character's point of view. But I
Yep.
did have the challenge of creating my own supernatural rules for these ghosts and how they
Oh, yes.
operate. And the different spirits that they come across have different levels of, I guess, power. So,
Oh, okay.
creating
Amazing.
those rules and like why this ghost can only do this kind of thing and why this ghost is able to affect electricity and wind, but this one can barely move up the stairs was certainly a challenge. So I can
I can
definitely
imagine.
relate to you with that. I mean, it's not as in depth as multiple levels of the death realm, but it is certainly a challenge to just create those rules and then adhere to them. Also, when you're
Yes, sticking
creating
to
those
them.
rules, yeah, sticking to them is a whole new other story there. But then when you're creating these rules, you also have to sort of create reasons as to why these rules exist and
Yes.
why they work the way they do. Even if it's something that the readers may never fully come across as they're reading, it's
Yes.
something that as authors we still have to put together as we're creating
Yes. Has to be
anything kind of
logical.
supernatural, and not even just supernatural, but I think it kind of holds true for like magic systems in
Yeah.
fantasy as well, which something that I love to do, but it is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, yeah. And like you mentioned, it's not always something that makes it onto the page. Sometimes it is just something that you know, and it's kind of like the iceberg analogy. Like so much of it is like off page, so much of it is below the surface that you can't actually appreciate as the reader. But those systems have to be there, otherwise they just don't make sense. And a lot of it for me was working it out as I was going as well. I would have to write something and then I'd be like, hang on, this doesn't work. How do you make it so that a ghost, there's like an ability for the main character like to get away when a ghost can literally show up anywhere, like when they can go through walls, they're not like bound by the normal laws of physics. And so that was very challenging. You kind of like realize sometimes you've written yourself into a corner because you're like, oh, my antagonists are like way too powerful here. And so you've got to then like go back and fix things. So yeah, it's a real process. But yeah, I can imagine the different like levels of ability and powers that would be quite challenging to have that be logical and make sense and be, consistent as well. That's always hard.
Yeah, I will say it's a lot of work, but it is equally just as much fun. And so I really enjoy writing it. And I do hope to re-enter the querying stages soon and be able to share my writing with all of my listeners
Yeah.
and with you.
Oh, wonderful. I can't wait. It sounds really good. Sounds like such an amazing book. And yeah, the querying trenches, it's a whole nother topic, isn't it? But good luck.
Thank you, thank you. But once again, today is your release day for No Mortal Creatures. So, all of our listeners, please consider picking up this Ghostception novel. I think you're going to love it. I'm super excited for it. And I just want to thank you again, Keish, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Crystal. It's been lovely.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you and happy reading.